So today we're going to look at the Princess Verachantesse skin shader. This is Princess Verachantesse. Her skin shader is identical to all the other girls, but the reason why we picked Princess Verachantesse is she has a skin tone that will demonstrate some of the coolness of this skin shader. So the first important thing is we want it to look decent in cycles, which it does. And then it's just a regular BSDF with a bunch of inputs and then going into cycles and Eevee. But I tend to concentrate on Eevee. It looks a little bit better to me at the moment, and so we're going to look at that. Let's go into material preview and see what we got. So the basic overview of this skin shader is that there are some group inputs to this BSDF. One of the differences between this skin shader and maybe a lot of others is that the subsurface color has an input going to it. It's not some constant value. And we'll see that here in a second. So let's take a look at these group boxes here. We'll do the three easy ones. This one on the left is the easiest. All it is a bunch of value nodes that go into the outputs. And so these are ways that I can use this same skin shader for multiple girls. I can plug in the values of those into this group in the middle, and they'll change so that the spots and the freckles will be the same on, will be one way on Vera, will be different on Anya, will be different on Tylee, etc. And then I can always, if I want one to have the exact same spots and freckles as another, I can just plug these in like that. So that's all that is going on with that box. Very simple box. SSS input here, let's take a look at this one. SSS input, also pretty simple. All we're doing is we're taking one of the vertex colors, which is one I call, let's take a look at it over here. This is this one here. R equals skin bumps, G equal SSS, and I haven't put anything on the blue channel yet, just red and green right now. So I take the green component of this vertex color, stick it into this multiply node, multiply it by 0.2, which makes it much smaller, and then send that out to SSS amount. And so basically what's going on here is I went and painted her nose and lips and ears and other bits, fingers and toes with green, but it turned out that was too much. If I just plugged these values straight into SSS, it was way too much SSS. So I multiply it by 0.2 and put that there. You can do otherwise depending on how bright green you paint that. Then I take the default vertex color, which is the vertex color that has the camera on it, in this case dark, which looks like this, and I take its saturation, amp it way up, the value, amp it even more up, hue I just leave alone, and then I put that into SSS color. And so then what ends up happening here then is that the SSS amount goes into subsurface, which some people might hard code to something. So here it changes depending on where on her body it is, like we saw earlier, her nose, her lips, her ears, her fingers, and her toes get more SSS. And the color goes into subsurface color. Now, if your character is a normal human character, she's going to be tan like this, or maybe she'll be light like this. But if she's not a normal human, what happens if she is colored like this? So what this does is that SSS color, it takes this skin tone. Remember, it amps up the brightness to way high and amps up the saturation to way high, and then that goes into subsurface color. So where a normal subsurface color would be this kind of like bright pink, what I end up with in her nose here is going to be this mint or maybe aqua. I'm not really sure what that color is. That much brighter and much more saturated. And so that's what you're going to see coming through on her nose. Her lips are kind of pink, so that doesn't really matter. Like, she's going to have pink lips anyway. But also then her ears are kind of bluish on the outside and greenish on the inside here. So there again, the SSS is going to be coming through like that. And the same thing again with her fingers here. Her fingers are yellow, so the SSS is going to be yellow. Over here on this side, her fingers are kind of a lavender, so that's what color the SSS is going to be there. And so that ends up making it look really nice if you have a character who doesn't have normal human skin tones. So for the rest of this video, we'll leave her in a normal skin tone. So that's the top box. The bottom box, similar to the top box, we're taking one of these vertex color groups and we're pulling out the green component because green is the shininess. And what we're doing is we're running it through, again, some math to kind of change. If you've painted it the wrong color, you usually do a little bit of math to change it a bit and making it bright. And so what is the color we're looking at here? This is this one for shine. And so in this case, green is shine. And so everywhere that there's green, and you can't see because the channels are mixed together, but her lips are very green, but there's also a lot of blue, so that's why you get the cyan. But there is a lot of green there, and the green is then what makes her lips shiny. So when we go back in here, You can see very, very shiny lips. And so let's put her back to that skin tone. There we go. So that way you can have some parts of her skin be shiny, some parts be matte. And so in this case, she's not wet, she's not oiled up or anything. So the shininess is pretty much relegated to her lips and actually her tongue. If we could see her tongue, no, I won't pull it up. Just trust me, I've painted her tongue very, very green as well. So the other thing that I do is I take that same shininess and I run it through, make it a much smaller value, and then send that to the specularity. I think these days the advice from the gurus is don't modify specular, hard code it to something, and then only do something with roughness. And so if you're redoing this skin shader for your own character, I would recommend seeing if you can get away without modifying the specular, just so you don't make those people who seem to know more about this than me angry. So then you just plug in the outputs of those things. The shine goes into the clear coat roughness and into the roughness. So that means less roughness, more shine, and that's kind of what those math nodes are doing for us there. Especially that 1.2 minus it. So the more you got this, the less rough is really what's going on for shine. And then specularity, of course, is going into specular. So that's that. We've covered the 3 easy groups. Now let's look at the beast. This is going to be painful. But what are you going to do? So this is that group, which has 3 groups inside of it. The good news is these 3 groups here are more or less just a texture. And we'll look at that in a bit, like how it's not just a texture. Actually, let's look at it right now. So what happens is we take the input. So remember the input of this. Well, all right, let's start with this bit first. So we have the input of the UVs, and this is just the UVs for the freckles and spots. But and I have my freckles and spots UVs are separate than the unwrapping I did for skin texture. So that bit goes into the vector inputs of this group here. So that's what this is. And then the scale and randomness is some other things, which we'll look at here in a second. But the scale just goes into the scale of the texture. The randomness just goes into the randomness of the texture. And this is a Voronoi texture, right? And so the mapping is important to do. But I would recommend, if you were setting this up from scratch, to set the scales to 1 on all 3 and the rotation to 0 on all 3. I would change that now, except that would change where the spots and freckles are on her, and that's part of what makes her who she is, so I'm not allowed to change these values anymore. The output of the Voronoi texture, the distance, just goes into the thing that multiplies the value times itself. That just makes the, as it's close to 0, it becomes very close to 0. As it's close to 1, it becomes very close to 1. And if it gets above 1, it'll shoot off rather rapidly. So that just, I forget what actually problem I was solving here, but at some point I wasn't able to get spots and freckles as convincing if I didn't do this. And so go ahead and try it without that, but also try it with it to see if that makes your texture better. Okay, so let's start on the left and move our way right. So we have an input of spot frequency that's going into the scale of this one. It's going into this set of nodes here, which just change the value. And so what we're doing is we're multiplying by 10, so we're making that number a lot larger, and then we're adding 1500 to it. And the reason is the number of